So, if there was one overarching story to the war in Ukraine, Ukraine is fighting back with what it has, but it doesn't have enough to effectively and fully fight back. And you'll see this played out in a number of the articles that I'm going to show you, just to show you the last 24 hours worth of news in Ukraine. 1,120 Russians are off the battlefield. Now, Zelensky has claimed that there's a 4-to-1 ratio or so of Ukrainians, generally speaking, through the war, 4-to-1 ratio of Russian to Ukrainian losses. Let's say that's the case, then you can understand about how many Ukrainians have been lost. And the Ukrainians are outnumbered population-wise about 3-to-1 by Russia, and that's how you could understand the losses chart every day. 8 tanks off the battlefield, 24 armored combat vehicles, 58 artillery pieces, 34 UAVs, 52 vehicles, and fuel tanks. So that's what's happened overnight. Now, if we go on and look at the number of drones, Russia didn't send very much, and the Ukrainians shot down 4 of the 5 Shahed attack UAVs that came into Ukraine last night. Now, there was also an interesting episode where, according to Belarus TG channel Hayan, a single Shahed drone launched by Russia altered course inside Ukraine and entered Belarus in the Gomel region. It flew for 3 hours in Belarus airspace and crashed somewhere near Vitebsk. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but that's what happened. And apparently, Belarus doesn't like this. Well, welcome to Ukraine's world. Meanwhile, Russians dropped a bomb on a bus stop with people in the city I can't pronounce in the Donetsk region. 3 men died on the spot, among them a 42-year-old bus driver. A woman born in 1983 died in the hospital. A 16-year-old boy was among the injured, along with 8 other people. Hitting a bus? What? Okay, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. 8 apartment buildings, 5 private houses, 4 stores, 2 administrative buildings, 2 educational institutions, and a civil car were damaged. Okay, a little bit more here. Russian troops struck this city with 2 UMPD D-30SN aerial bombs hitting a public transportation stop and an administrative building. Okay, so what's really happening here is that they weren't targeting a bus, they were targeting a civilian neighborhood, which they shouldn't be doing to begin with these guided bombs. Now, these guided bombs are interesting because they have a range of 50 to 90 kilometers, and they can't really be stopped because you can't go to the source. This is the city in question. Now, the Ukrainians are allowed to use American weapons and British weapons to hit about 14% of the 300-kilometer range that they're able to strike in, and so these bombs can come in with impunity, and that's what's causing this. So until we change our policy, nothing's going to really change. Okay, meanwhile, the Ukrainians are striking back in the ways that they have the ability to strike back. Jason J. Smart writes, it's a beautiful morning in Russia as Ukrainian drone destroyed another Russian oil refinery in Rostov. Here's another view of this. This is from Euromaidan Press. Ukraine attacks a Russian oil refinery in the Rostov region. Local Russian governor said that 49 firefighters, 14 pieces of equipment are working to eliminate the fire. Factory was also set on fire at night in Moscow suburb. We don't know whether this is related to Ukraine, may very well be, but we just don't have the facts yet. Meanwhile, the ISW is saying that Ukrainian forces aim to regain tactical initiative. The scale of Ukrainian attacks and the possibility of conducting a new offensive in operational significance will largely depend on the scale of military supplies from the West. Not just what is being supplied, but how soon it can get there. Here's the actual article about that. Western and U.S. officials predict that Ukrainian forces will primarily be on the defensive for the next 6 months, with the large-scale counteroffensive not expected until 2025. Nonetheless, Ukrainian troops are actively engaging in limited counterattacks in specific frontline areas. The ISW continues to assess that Russian forces are unlikely to achieve meaningful operational advances in Ukraine. So there's not going to be like one swift blow. Russian leader Vladimir Putin's strategy appears to focus on slow, steady territorial gains rather than rapid, significant maneuvers. Okay, so that's the very definition of attritional warfare. A war of attrition is a military strategy in which one side tries to cause the other to lose so many soldiers and have so much military equipment destroyed that the enemy forces are worn down until they collapse. To address manpower issues, and Ukraine is having manpower issues. Russia's having it too, but Ukraine, I think, is in worse condition as far as manpower goes. They're far more motivated. They're trying to defend their own homes. So motivationally, they're much higher than the Russians. But as far as actual manpower, they're lower. To address manpower issues, Ukraine is currently forming several new brigades, which could be crucial in shifting the initiative. General Sirski is talking about how the armed forces of Ukraine combat units are to have more robotic and unmanned systems. Now, this is to supplement the manpower shortage. The other day, I worked at one of the training centers of the armed forces of Ukraine where testing research tests of various forms of integrated use of ground and air robotic and unmanned systems in real combat conditions are continuing. It's a very important project. Together with a team of the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, we are making every effort to prepare system solutions for the effective use of wide range of robotic platforms. And we'll see that continue to evolve on the battlefield. So they're working it out, and they really have to because they are at a disadvantage in sheer numbers. Meanwhile, the NATO conference was this past week. They should be providing more material. The White House put out this statement. The new Ukraine compact says loudly and clearly that we will continue to stand with Ukraine every step of the way. We are united against Putin's senseless war and behind Ukraine as it fights to defend its freedom. But we're really not providing what they need to win. We're providing enough to grind Russia down. This is an article from Foreign Policy. NATO is helping Ukraine to fight, but not to win. The publication writes that the summit in Washington revealed the main contradiction in the West's strategy to support Ukraine. Military supplies have helped Kyiv fight back against Russian forces, but do not allow it to win the war. In addition, there is skepticism that the new aid will be able to turn the situation in Kyiv's favor. The Russian army has recovered from its failures faster than expected and is quickly learning to resist Western weapon systems. And this is true. We're giving them aid, but we're not allowing them to take the gloves off and actually hit back in meaningful ways. Meanwhile, some other interesting articles. A Russian artist is jailed for 9 years for donating $30, you heard that correctly, $30 to the Ukrainian army. This is just absolutely fascinating. A Russian student artist has been sentenced to 9 years in prison on treason charges for sending $30 to the Ukrainian army. The news outlet reported that she was initially accused of donating $10 to a Ukrainian fund on the first day of Russia's invasion on February 24th. FSB agents broke into her phone and found out about another $20 donation in April of 2022. And so, if you do the math here, she's sentenced to 9 years, or essentially a year for every $3.33. So she's sentenced to 9 years for donating less than a penny per day. That's Russia. And yet Russia accuses Ukraine of being a fascist regime. In other political news, the UK Defence Minister reaffirms unwavering support. The new government has confirmed the allocation of £3 billion annually to Ukraine until 2030. General Zaluzhny is starting his new job as the ambassador to the UK. Zelensky flew to Ireland. The president's plane landed at the international airport Shannon, and he's going to be meeting with the prime minister. Meanwhile, the Pentagon chief, Lloyd Austin, has another phone call with the defense minister of Russia, Belousov, and they didn't really talk about anything substantive from what I can detect, but lines of communication are open, and that's always a good thing. Now, I want to zoom out just a little bit. 3 days ago, an Israeli strike in Syria killed a former bodyguard of Lebanon's Hezbollah leader. And then this just came out as Russia is warning Israel of dramatic consequences following their strikes in Syria. Remember, the Russians and the Syrians are very, very cozy. And that could become a very problematic thing for the entire world if Russia really involves itself there. Now, the day before yesterday, Russian foreign minister said that if Ukraine joins NATO, either Ukraine disappears or NATO does. And Russian supporters are saying, why does Russia's neighbors fear Russia? Well, I don't know. Maybe it's because Russia invaded Moldova in 92 and then flattened Grozny in 99 and used polonium in 06 and invaded Georgia in 08 and invaded Crimea and eastern Ukraine in 14 and down MH17 in 14 and flattened Aleppo in 15 and so the list goes on, right? Now, I want to leave you with this because people will say that Ukraine should just sit down, make a deal with Putin, and have a treaty, and it'll all be over. But Russia's not known for standing by the treaties that it signs. Here's just a list from United 24, and it goes back quite a ways. Goes on and on. up to the modern day. And so if you think that you can have a deal with Russia, you might be mistaken. All right, my friends, thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes. Tell me what you thought about this below, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.